Is Robert Whittaker about to expose Khamzat Chimaev? Let's discuss. What's up, everybody? LauraSanko here. As always, I am joined by the great Professor Dean Thomas in his blue shirt, in his blue room, just doing that blue thing.
I got the blue thing going on. I love
Yeah.
this shirt because I got it. You're not going to believe where I got it from. You might not even know this artist, but I bought it at the Haley Reinhart concert in Louisville when UFC went to Louisville. And
I
she
am
was
not
performing.
familiar.
Haley Reinhart was on like American Idol or The Voice or something. And
Uh-huh.
she's an amazing artist that you'd never expect me to like. But she happened to be in Louisville when the UFC was there. And I found out and I went to her concert and I sat up front and I bought this shirt.
Oh, let me see it. Stand up. What's it say? Off the ground. Love it.
Off the ground.
Love it. Well,
And
speaking,
and it applies to fighting because
it does.
fans don't want to see fighters on the ground.
Yes.
So off the ground.
We went off about that in our main event video if you want to check out that conversation. But this video is about UFC 308's co-main event. Before we talk about that, though, I do need to thank one dear individual who understood the assignment. It was my fault, guys. I confused you, okay? Last time I asked for your video submissions. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts about upcoming fights. I was not very clear about which upcoming fights, so you guys sent them for the ones that were like a day in advance of when we were already recording the video. We need you to do them for the next pay-per-view. So I'm talking about UFC 309 in the future, okay? Give us your thoughts on whatever you think about the fights. It can be main, co-main. You can ask us a question. You can go off about how much you do or don't like Dean. It's totally up to you. Just send it to oneononecombatsports@gmail.com. 30-second-ish video shot vertically. We'll compile them. We'll talk about them. But for now, here's the one guy that figured it out.
Khamzat's gonna have a big problem here because Khamzat recently fought the former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman at middleweight, and I think he barely walked away from that one. And I think Robert Whittaker is a actual middleweight. I don't think he'll go to decision. He'll probably go to knockout, possibly third round, and with Robert Whittaker for the win.
So thank you very much for that, sir. We appreciate you. I kind of, it's kind of fun seeing like faces to fans. I go through the comments fairly regularly, but I don't know who any of these people are or what they look like. So it's kind of nice to put a face to a name there. So if you guys can continue to submit those, that'd be great. But let's talk about this co-main event, Dean. This is, man, this fight's been talked about for, I feel like, a year.
Well, any Khamzat fight has been talked about for a year.
What's that?
Any Khamzat fight has been talked about for a year. So I'm just glad they were getting them back.
Is that not, I mean, I hate to start on like a downer. It's not really a downer. It's just a matter of fact. Like the man is 13-0. He burst onto the scene. Our jaws dropped at what he was able to do in a 1 week period with 2 fights in 2 different weight classes, just destroying those 2 guys. And then he kept doing it. And then like he just kind of fell off a cliff and became one of my least favorite things in a fighter, which is unreliable. I want to know that I can rely on you. It's not that I don't like him. It's not that I think any less of his skill set. I want to know that when the fight gets announced, that I get to be excited about it for a long period of time, not anxious about whether it's going to happen or not.
Well, you see, that's the hard part about this entire fight game. And there's something about being signed to the UFC and having a certain level of success in the UFC to where now you forget that the UFCs can go on without you. And that's what happens to a lot of fighters is that when they're up and coming, they're willing to do anything. They're fighting anybody. They're beating people up. They're doing what they got to do. Then they get to the UFC, have some success, and then all of a sudden it's like, me. I can do this. I can do that. I want to do me. I want to. It's like, yo, dude, what happened to the guy who came here and was trying to prove to the world that they were the best? Like in the beginning, you were trying to prove to the world that you're the best. And then when you get to the UFC and you win a couple fights, you start thinking that was you proving to the world that you're the best. And you just prove to the world that you are hard to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's what sucks about guys like Khamzat is that Can't trust him. He's unreliable. You don't know what he's going to do. And I wish it was you don't know what he's going to do because he's so great at fighting. Like, is he going to knock him out? Is he going to submit? Like, that's the type of unpredictable nature that I want in a fighter. Not is he going to show up? Is he going to get hurt before the fight? Because anytime fighters get hurt before a fight, when you're fighting at that level, if you get hurt before a fight, it's your fault. You are supposed to monitor your training and do your training so that you show up to the fight. End of the day, that's what it is. You're supposed to, you fight, he fights once a year. You mean to tell me you can't make it to that fight? You have to monitor that so that you don't get hurt. And when he's gotten hurt, I blamed it all on him. Him overtraining or not paying attention, doing something stupid, always from something stupid. So him not showing up to fights has always it ruined cards. He's single-handedly ruined cards in the UFC, but he's such a great fighter that we've given him a pass.
But do you think sorry, finish your thought.
But now it's going to happen. Now he's got to show up, and they put, to me, in my opinion, the worst possible matchup in front of him.
Yeah. I feel like this weird combination of severe illnesses, which I don't doubt the realness of the illnesses. I don't think he's making shit up. He's not like staging, photos in hospital beds, I don't think. And then you've got the egregious weight misses, one of which was caught, one of which was, toweled out in Abu Dhabi. I can't remember what
I was there for that. I watched that happen.
It was wild, and no one talked about it. Why didn't no one talk about it?
The commission was like, oh, he's like 3 pounds under. And no one said nothing. I was like, yo, y'all just gonna let my man get on the scale like this?
I know. Like, wait a second. He was just over by, I don't remember how much it was, but it was like a decent amount. And then minutes later, he's magically 3 pounds under. Anyway, so clearly some towel action with the weigh-in. But then he misses weight and the whole card has to reshuffle with that one when he ended up fighting Kevin Holland.
The Nate Diaz card?
Yes. It was such a mess. Anyway, he causes that chaos. And then the whole visa issue, right? Like, my understanding is not from UFC sources, but from other sources, that he cannot fight in the United States and that's just not ever going to happen because of his associations with Kadyrov. So you have really limited yourself to what cards you can even fight on. And then if you get sick, it's like a whole nother cycle of waiting. I guess my question is, has all of that stuff affected how the fans, their level of excitement for him?
I don't think so. I think we pay more attention to it because we are invested in this game in a different way.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think the fans really even know because they're so distracted every week with another big fight that when Khamzat doesn't fight, they're just like, oh man, Khamzat's not fighting, but but we got this fight coming up. So I think that there is an element of them just forgetting how disrespectful he's been towards the process.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that the fans are going to really look at it that way. I think they're just happy that we get them. But I don't want to jinx it. But I would. But now I have to say it. But I would not be surprised if between now and Saturday something stupid happens.
Dean.
I don't want to jinx it, but I'm just saying.
Dean, I feel like I need to pray over this fight. I need to lay hands on this fight.
I know.
Well, listen, let's just pretend like it's going to happen. So we'll talk about it.
No. I said I won't be surprised. I'm still.
I know.
99% sure that this happens.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah.
Listen, it is the matchup I want to see because certainly more than anyone he's ever fought before, this is a real fight. And that's not taking anything away from Kamaru. It's just a big reminder that Kamaru took that fight on extremely late notice. That's the biggest asterisk. Not dissing Kamaru at all, but we all know that Kamaru doesn't wrestle the way that he did 5, 6 years ago. And he took it super late notice and still, turned the tables in that fight big
And that's
time.
all right.
Yeah. So is this potentially an exposing of the limitations of Khamzat Chimaev? Because if anybody can do it, it is well-rounded, fight IQ, been there, done that, at the top of this division forever, Robert Whittaker, former champion.
I believe so. I believe, and Robert Whittaker Robert Whittaker to me is a real fighter. And in a real fighter, you can see their vulnerabilities, you can see their ups and downs. They let us in on that too. Like Robert
Mm-hmm.
Whittaker has been very vocal and let us in on his journey and his roller coaster ride. And I think there was a period in his career where he wasn't all the way there, and that happens to fighters, and that can determine your careers. It can determine your career. But for Robert Whittaker, he's been resilient enough to not allow the losses to Izzy determine his career, or the loss to Dricus determine his career. And now we're seeing this sort of this resurrected Robert Whittaker after those losses and realizing,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, losing ain't as bad as it may seem, but winning is a lot better. And now I can fight with a little more freedom, and I know I can compete with these guys. I've been in there, and I think that we're looking at just a demon of a human being in terms of what he can bring to the table in a fight. And that's a scary man right there when he's like this.
I completely agree with your assessment. And I was trying to figure out, like, what has it been? Not that I wasn't a big fan of Robert Whitaker's. I was certainly the high level martial arts, the tactician, but it wasn't always like, you didn't feel like you were going to get some gut wrenching performance or some sensational finish. It was going to be very well thought out, right? Which there's a certain level of appreciation for that, of course. But, you know, the, I still have a little bit of just bleed in me as an MMA fan, right? There's a little part of my brain that still is that guy. And I gotta tell you, the last couple of fights, I'm like, God damn, this is like Robert Whittaker from the streets. This is a different man. This is like Robert Whittaker with a chip, he's kind of like dangerous now. He's kind of a bad guy now. Not bad, but like he's fighting with a little bit of, I don't know, extra something.
Yeah, I'm telling. It's because when you lose to the best, and then you realize that there was something in his brain that he recognized his losses, especially the loss to Dricus, that it was on him.
Yeah.
He recognizes that there was something about his performance that he knew he did wrong, that he never wants that to happen again. I've been there where you're like, sometimes you get beat by a better person and you just go, man, they were better. I got to do more work to try to catch up. But sometimes you go into fights and you go, I fought like such a scrub that I never want to feel that again.
Yeah. And it's not that I thought he fought like a scrub, but you definitely get the sense that like when he lost to Izzy, it was like, man, that was a close chess match. I made a bad move. I got caught by a master, right? So you never had that like, fuck this after that fight. And I feel like after he lost to Dricus, he was just like, what the Dricus? Which now we know it's not, it's not that bad to lose to
I mean,
Dricus.
it aged well,
It aged
but
very well, but at the moment I'm sure he was just like, what the fuck? Like that guy, you know?
but I mean, but he's been in there with him and he was doing well against him. It wasn't so when we look back at that, because I watched that fight not too long ago, and we have a short memory because of how it ended.
Yeah.
And we look, oh man, Dricus beat up Robert Whittaker. But he didn't really beat him up, like with the exception of like that, the headlock and then the jet. Like Robert Whittaker was doing his thing for a while.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was Robert Whittaker, he had a moment of a lapse of focus.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the fight, he lost his focus and he wasn't fighting like Robert Whittaker. And it killed the fight out of him. And he got beat by a guy who doesn't lose focus. And that's the one thing we can say about Dricus is he's always pedal to the metal. He
Yeah.
doesn't focus. And Rodriguez took advantage of him, and Robert Whittaker would never live that down.
But that Costa fight, that
Oh
was
yeah,
like that was a oh, Robert Whittaker's got that dog in him fight, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I think that was a fight too that when I look at his performance in that, I almost think that he made that harder on himself just to prove that he can do that.
That he could have that type of fight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he can do that, and I think that was a part of his growth as a fighter, in which we're getting today. Was that he and fighters do this? They self sabotage themselves, or they write their own story, which is easier to write for them. Because like I think he goes out and he writes this story against Costa and goes, I'm going to make this a little tougher just so that I can prove to the world and I can prove to myself that I am a dog. And I believe that he did that and he was successful in that. And now moving forward, he knows that he has that in him. He don't have to do that no more. Like when you saw him fight Ikram,
Alaskarov, yeah.
yeah, Ikram Alaskarov, he went out there and just this ain't even gonna be close, dog. I know with the history you bring and you know your reputation, but this ain't gonna be close. And he shut him out. And I got the feeling, I got a feeling that this one is trending in that direction.
Yeah, that was like it went from the Dricus fight was like a what the fuck fight, and then Paulo Costa was like I got that dog in me fight, and then the Ikram Alaskarov fight was like a nah son fight. And
Yeah,
you feel like you're going to see like another. Everybody sees you as the boogeyman, but you know, I'm not scared of you.
yeah. I think this is going to put him in a position that he fights for the title after Strickland, of course.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he's not going to have to fight another one before he gets the title.
Let me read a couple stats, and then we can talk about what we think this fight might actually end up looking like when it plays out. Robert Whittaker, 17-5 in the UFC. Khamzat Chimaev, 7-0 in the UFC. Of course, he's 13-0 overall. 1.5-inch reach advantage for Chimaev. Robert Whittaker, 33, Chimaev, 30. Striking accuracy for Chimaev is insanely high. It's 58.8%, but that's because he really only strikes to set up his takedowns for the most part. And he remember the beginning of his career, he basically was hitting guys one time and putting them away. Strikes landed per minute, 4.58 for Robert, so pretty high. 5.72 for Chimaev, a little bit higher, obviously there. Takedown average per 15 minute, 3.99. So basically 4 takedowns per 3-round fight for Chimaev. That's insanely high. 100% takedown defense for Chimaev. No one's trying to take this guy down. And a submission average of 2.66 per 15 minutes. For Robert Whittaker, takedown average is 0.8. Takedown defense is 82.9%, which I think obviously that's going to be a factor in this fight. And the submission average is 0. Robert's not out there hunting for submissions. So the wrestling of Robert Whittaker, I was trying to think about, you know, we've obviously seen him face good wrestlers before. Fought Yoel Romero. Even, you know, Marvin Vettori's not a lights out wrestler, but he's a good grappler. Robert Whittaker fought on the Australian, or excuse me, wrestled for the Australian national team in the what's it called? The Queen's Games? I don't know. I'm not British, but it's the Commonwealth Games. That's what it is. The Commonwealth Games. He's got good wrestling. He's got tremendous takedown defense. Do you think his defense holds up against Khamzat? Do you think his get-up ability is good enough? Or is this literally do not get touched?
No, not early. I don't
Yeah.
think if he gets grabbed early, he's going to go down. I think early he's got to rely on his footwork, getting tied up. Because if he does get grabbed, I don't think there's anybody who can stop a clean takedown from Chimaev in the UFC right now. Like I don't care what weight class. I just feel like if Chimaev gets in on you, you're going to hit the floor at some level. Like whether you get up or not, that's going to be entirely up to you. And which doesn't really seem like the best idea because when you think about the general path that Chimaev has, he gets these takedowns, and then guys go to their knees, and then he just hits them with an onslaught of punches from the back. The only person who's been ever able to deal with that has been Gilbert Burns. And you know why
Hmm.
Gilbert Burns dealt with that? Because he went to his guard, and Chimaev said, "Nah, son, I don't want no parts of this." And I don't know how good Robert Whittaker's guard is, but I think that that would be his best way of creating space to get up is to have Chimaev just say, "Nah, son, I don't want no part of this." Because when God and even Usman did, like Usman gave up his back, and that's how Usman lost the fight. He just got too much time chewed up with Chimaev on his back. Anytime you give your back to Chimaev, he's going to stick to you for the entire round. You're not getting
Hmm.
away. So I think for Robert Whittaker, his best chance of victory, or at least early on, is to use his footwork, which he has, to stay away from getting grabbed. And if he does get taken down, have a threatening enough guard to where Chimaev just stands up and then he can get back to his feet.
Do you think this is just simply a matter of like Robert Whittaker waiting until surviving until the third round when we all, at least historically, have seen Chimaev really start to fall off a cliff?
Yeah, I think honestly, I believe that
You've never
this
seen him in 5 rounds.
no, oh
Like,
no, there's no way he goes 5 rounds. If he has to go 5 rounds and pace himself in 5 rounds, he's getting finished by a lot of guys.
hmm.
But I believe that Robert Whittaker has the ability to do more damage. I would not be surprised to see a head kick knockout.
Mm.
I believe that Robert Whittaker has the ability to do more damage than have to wait for 3 rounds and wait for Chimaev to be tired. I don't think he has to rely on Chimaev getting tired.
Yeah. Do
It'll
you
help, but I don't think he has to rely on it.
I guess that brings up a good point. Like, I mean, Chimaev is surrounded by smart people. He not that he wasn't surrounded by them before, but he switched teams. He's training in Russia now. He's no longer at All Stars in Sweden. Um, do you think that he is going to alter his fight management? You know, knowing that Robert Whittaker is tough, Robert Whittaker is savvy, and the likelihood that I make it to a fourth round against this very tough, very savvy guy is pretty significant. And what am I going to do in that fourth or fifth round? What am I going to have? I mean, or can he even approach a fight differently than he does? Because then he's not him, right? Then
Yeah,
he's not
I don't
dangerous.
know if he can. I don't know if I think at some level, like you can get away with it for a little bit, but I don't know if it's sustainable throughout an entire fight. I think he can approach it and like, all right, I'm going to pace myself a little bit, but at some level, he's either going to get hurt and be forced because he's pacing himself too much. He's going to
Hmm.
get hurt and be forced to fight hard, or he's just going to get impatient and then just turn into, all right, this is me. This is what I do. I mean, think
Yeah.
about it. You follow football. I mean, certain quarterbacks play better in certain schemes, and if you change the entire offense up on them, then they're like, "Oh, this is not really the offense that works for me."
Yep.
And I think that's the same thing with Chimaev. Like his offense works for him, and it's great against B-level guys and A- guys. But I think that once he gets against like A+ guys, he's going to have a lot of problems, especially with
So,
time. When you add more time to it, there's going to be a lot of problems.
yeah. I mean, it was already problems in the Burns fight and in the Usman fight. Now it's gonna be problems.
Because he's dealing with a guy who moves better than Burns, who's faster than Burns, kicks better than Burns, will be harder to take down than Burns. Like he's going up against a guy and who's super motivated.
Yeah.
And Burns gave him all those problems. Kamaru didn't give him problems until the end. Like the first 2 rounds, he was all over Kamaru.
Hmm.
Um, and that makes sense too because Kamaru doesn't move at all. He can't move at all. But Robert Whittaker can move. And his low stance is going to be a problem too. Now, Chimaev, one thing I'll say about Chimaev is that I don't know if there's a person with a faster low shot.
Oh my God.
Like his
And
low
especially
shot,
for how tall he is.
yeah, his low shot is unbelievable. But because of the way Whittaker stands and the way he's able to move his feet, I think he can negate some of that speed, as long as he maintains the proper distance. I think he can negate that speed. But yeah, I think this is the fight where the crows come home to roosts.
Mm.
I think that they're gonna it catches up to him. You
So what do
know,
you think? That's your prediction. What do you think it looks like overall? Do you think Robert does a fair amount of damage even early, or is this something where Robert's got to survive and get out of some really tricky spots and then late come on?
I'm gonna give Chimaev his props and say that he does some decent work in the first round. And it can get a little rough for both guys in the first round, but then I think by the time the second round hits, and not because Chimaev gets tired, but I think that Whittaker just figures it out and then just turns it on and then is able to put some really good offense together where Chimaev is like, oh, snap. No, I wasn't expecting this.
I will say I still can't think of anyone who is more diabolically intimidating than Khamzat Chimaev, regardless of any shortcomings that we've discussed during this video. The way that do you remember when he and Darren Till like perched themselves on top of the
Oh, that
octagon?
was awesome. That was one of my favorite moments in UFC.
And he's just got this like, you know, like madman sort of the way that he like grins and like when he's bent over at the beginning of the fight, that's a scary dude.
It's really scary. But going up against that, if you can take that away from him,
Mm.
it makes it worse because I think that not that that's an act. I don't necessarily believe that that's an act, but I think that that is the fuel behind his fight game is
Yeah.
that intimidation factor.
Yeah.
I
And
think
if you take that away,
if you take that away from him, I think that you're dealing with a very human guy. Because after that Burns fight, he came up to the desk. He was working the desk, and after that Burns fight, he was very humble.
was he?
Very humble. He was like, "Yeah, it was a lot tougher than I thought. These guys are good." Because before that, he was praising, he was singing I'm gonna run through everybody in one
Yeah.
night. Then after that fight, he was
Smash everybody.
yeah. After that fight, it wasn't. He had no bass in his voice. He sounded like Mickey Mouse up there. He won the fight, but it's still. I was like, "Yo, man, say it with your chest," because he had no bass in his voice.
No
So,
bass in his voice. I like that.
so in terms of, I think if Whittaker could strip that from him at some
Hmm.
point in the fight, strip that intimidation factor, and let him know that you don't intimidate me. I think Chimaev falls apart.
Hmm. I feel like that's what you do when you walk in a room, Dean. You just take the bass out of everybody's voice.
That's right. And then I bring up the base and all.
Walk in there with that barrel chest.
Well, it used to, like it's a barrel chest sometimes. It depends on how tight my shirt is, and then it's barrel stomach. But I'm
No,
working on that, Laura. I'm working
you're
on
good.
that.
No, stop. You're good. You're good. You're good. I love it, Dean. These are going to be great fights. Super, super good fights. Appreciate you, appreciate your time and your thoughts and your knowledge. And we appreciate you guys, the fans, always tuning in. If you didn't already check out the main event video as well, we dropped one of those. Click like, click subscribe, helps us so much. Send in your thoughts on UFC 309 one-on-one combat sports at gmail.com, and we will see you next time.